To FESIG, the Free Energy Special Interest Group, where science meets spirituality in the quest for truth and knowledge to free humanity and transform this planet into a paradise.
Hi everyone, hi, this is Crystal. I have here with me, I'm the chair of FESIG meetings, and we have our co-chairs, Dr. Fres Fresel, who's the chief teacher of our R&D teams, and we have the head of R&D, Pontus Hefger, and we have board member James Ring. All four of us are board members of FESIG, and we are always here for you in all the public meetings. And today we have, if I would share screen right now, I'm going to share with you the agenda for today's meeting. Today is the 5th of April, 2023, and we have our 111th FESIG meeting. As usual, we have some of the most amazing speakers, and we have here with us on the first session, Dr. Sandra Rose Michael, who was presenting her EE system, which was really amazing when it comes to the testimonial part. We were like, wow, it's miraculous. So that has just been done, and if you could see on the screen, the first session speaker, and then the second session speakers there are two speakers for the sessions. The second session, we decided to have Brian Besco speak first. Alfred has let him speak first because apparently Brian Besco's technology is also working together with Dr. Michaels. So the two of them can do a little bit of input on Brian's presentation as well. So Brian actually is sharing a 3-breath technique to move into the sacred space of the heart. He's talking about his Tensor Technology as well, which has hundreds of applications, including EMF mitigation, water restructuring, consciousness expansion, and soul exploration, which is really fascinating. Alfred will be talking about the AI invasion, which is really urgent for everyone to be aware of, because it's like, if we don't do anything about it, it will wipe out the human species, unfortunately. So they are all very important, and we have this platform here where science meets spirituality, where we share knowledge with some of the most amazing speakers on the planet coming here with golden hearts, sharing whatever they can share here on this platform, so all of us will learn together and improve on our own developments, as well as helping us to assist us in the awakening process with the Intel disclosure speakers as well. And then we can achieve and excel in our divine mission here as well. So to contact me, write to Crystal at truevisionofpeace.com, our website, truevisionofpeace.com/FESIG.html, where we have our speakers' names. If you hover your mouse over their names, click on it, it will take you to their website, and you can contact them, and you can collaborate, okay, that way. And if you join our Telegram group, FESIG_group, you'll be able to interact with fellow members there, form study groups, and discuss what the speakers has been sharing that you could learn from. Thank you. So now I would like to introduce Brian. Brian Besco is the owner of Twisted Sage Studios. He and his family create some of the world's most powerful subtle energy tools. Brian teaches consciousness workshops around the world, including the keynote speaker for American Society of Dowsers dowsing, folks. Tensor rings have been proven to restructure water, as mentioned in the new science of water, and several independent tests show tensor fields mitigating the harmful effects of cell phone radiations on the physical, mental, emotional, and energetic fields of human beings. Brian and his family have greatly assisted the consciousness movement over the past 13 years. Brian will be talking about Tensor Technology, which has hundreds of applications, which I just mentioned earlier, and will share a 3-breath technique to move into the sacred space of the heart. Thank you, Brian, for choosing to share your knowledge here with us today. Over to you.
Thank you, Crystal. It is an honor to be here today. And
Namaste.
yes, I appreciate all of you who are here today as well, the board members and participants. So yeah, again, my name is Brian Besco with Twisted Sage Studios. We're a small business in South Dakota. We've been doing energy healing, energy work. Gosh, I'll probably mention my sister a couple times for decades here. And we just started, gosh, about 13 years ago with the Tensor Rings. And just kind of like to give a little bit of an overview of Tensor Technology so that we can kind of segue into what the real passion is the consciousness work. And so Tensor Rings are actually created with copper, which is a crystal structure. And there's a piezoelectric energy flow within a piece of copper wire because it aligns the crystal structure. And what we do is we take a wire, we fold it in half and twist it and bring the ends back together so it's creating a counter-rotating flow of piezoelectric energy. But we cut these to the 100,000ths of a centimeter, very specific measurements that were used for such things as building the Great Pyramids, the city of Teotihuacan in Mexico, and other megalithic structures, as well as new geometries that have been coming onto the planet over the past decades. And so basically they create what is known as a tensor field. It is a column of light that comes out of both sides of the rings. And it all started with my sister actually was channeling in a specific elemental symbol, the elemental of water, the spirit of water, Hedika. It's also known as the Triskelion. It is something that, as we were getting that out there about 14 years ago, the gals at the New Science of Water had just wrote their first edition of the book, Dancing with Water. And they called us up one day and said, well, all your channeled information backs our science on what this Triskelion does with water, with root growth of plants, that it is restructuring water and increasing root growth 15 feet out when you make these copper Triskelions and put them in the soil. Well, they called me 2 weeks later and said, well, we're scientists, but there's this gentleman who sits on our front porch every night when we come home from work, and he has messages for you on how to create tensor rings. Well, I was very science-minded at the time too. But I said, okay, well, give this a shot. And so Slim Spurling is the one who rediscovered tensor technology in 1991, him and all of his friends. They worked and created this technology. Now, he came to me in 2007, or he passed away in 2007, came to me in 2010 to teach me how to make the tensor rings. And so basically through that time, I've done a lot of our own research with these and always try to convince people scientifically of the tensor rings, which, again, the New Science of Water, they show Dr. Philip Callahan, who's the one who termed paramagnetism. Dr. Callahan was showing that the tensor rings contain the highest paramagnetic value out of anything that he'd ever tested. They basically create oramus out of your drinking water because they put such a high spin rate to the molecules within water that in the lab, water becomes lighter in weight. So it is harmonizing water. It is restructuring water. But really where we see it working with the water is bringing in the consciousness of the water, which is where we see the true magic happening there. And we'll discuss more about the consciousness here. Just to cover some of the scientific. We also make cell phone tabs well, and for household electric and computers. With the cell phone tabs, we've done extensive biofeedback studies. Gosh, one we did in LA last summer, which was a costly study, which basically shows that when you apply the cell phone tab to your cell phone, that it aligns chakras, energy bodies, clears the mental and emotional fields, makes organs function better. And it is basically taking a discordant energy of your cell phone and turning it into a electromagnetic field that is beneficial to the body. Because as you know, heart math has shown that we do have that electromagnetic field, the torus, around our heart. That's about a 6-foot wide toroidal field. And so we are a bioelectromagnetic body. And what we see with people that have such sensitivities to EMF is that if you have a discordant EMF, and EMF is a part of all physical reality. So EMF in itself is not bad, but it's the discordant ones that can come in and basically knock you off center balance. And that is where you receive all of those EMF sensitivity issues. And so the tensor fields are simply harmonizing water electromagnetic fields and all other energetic fields. And so it was mentioned here that like with Dr. Sandra's work, there's a few people who do utilize our pyramid structures with the tensor technologies with Dr. Sandra's boxes, which has been pretty fantastic. And as you mentioned, like Dr. Dream, a good friend of mine, who does utilize that. And actually, we have somebody that's on our call right now here too that also has some of Dr. Sanders' technology that utilizes our tensor technology with it. Because basically, tensor technology it harmonizes and it amplifies each other. So, like let's say you find somebody who uses crystal healing. Basically, they harmonize and amplify each other. But really, again, where we see it is bringing in the consciousness of that crystal more. So when I started making these tools 13 years ago, and we call them tools, again, I was speaking at the Tesla technology conventions and writing articles and doing all the scientific that I could possibly do. And it was rather limited at the time what we could do. Slim Spurling, he actually worked with the military for a while. And a lot of other people trying to really validate the tensor tools in his time. And you know, they use an oscilloscope to measure the frequency within rings. So Slim Spurling, the original ring that they worked with came from the Great Pyramids in Egypt. It was a very specific measurement, the royal cubit, and it produced a measurable frequency of 144 megahertz. Then Slim worked with a physicist, Hans Becker, who they created a 177 megahertz tensor ring. Then there was 188 megahertz. And through the years, we've worked with professional dowsers and our own intuitive to discover new qubit measures, such as one that produces a 333 megahertz, which isn't static. Basically, you take it over a body of water, and that megahertz will fluctuate. Over the years, we really began to understand more about the other side of the tensor tools, and that is the consciousness side. So through my time of remembering creating these tools for lifetimes, my sister and I discovered what we call the etheric templates. It is simply the higher dimensional form of these tensor fields and is where all the true magic comes. When we discovered these etheric templates, basically we began to bring in such as the consciousness of water into those etheric aspects of these tools. And so over the years, there are so many frequencies, properties, you know, the consciousness of water, of plants, of all the crystal and mineral kingdoms of the earth are all available within these fields. And that is because they are connected into the higher dimensional aspect of these tools. And so it's the sacred measurements that creates a tensor field. And we actually teach people how to make these. We have a website. we have several websites connected to our Twisted Sage website, and one of those is called Sacred Measures, and that gives all the measurements down to, you know, all the 100,000ths of a centimeter on the measurements that we use to create these tools. And some of them are even created in a straight line cubit measure. So when Slim Spurling first started working with this, it was actually measurements that, again, came from the Great Pyramid. And some of those measurements they have found create the sine wave of hydrogen. So a sine wave of hydrogen, if you cut any kind of a rod in increments of 8.3 inches, it then brings through that sine wave of the hydrogen atom. So all the straight line measurements that we make, such as our dowsing rods and wands and all of our ascension chambers, our ascension pyramids, and our other chambers that we have here in the studio, all utilize those specific measurements that hold those energetics within it, such as the sine wave of hydrogen. So there really is a lot of science behind the tensor technology, but again, to us, it is more about the space that they bring you into. And that's where I'd like to kind of move into doing a meditation. I was telling you, my sister Brenda, she's a humble country gal here in South Dakota. We live in this tiny town in the Black Hills of South Dakota. And my sister, gosh, she got her wake up call back in 1999, and she channeled in a lot of different energy groups, even Thoth and Metatron and all that. Actually, it was Thoth who taught us how to do the Merkaba activation per like Drunvalo Melchizedek's work. That Drunvalo Melchizedek taught the Merkaba activation with the 17 breath technique and the mudras. And he did a lot of the research showing that the Merkaba is simply an electromagnetic field that is connected to all humans, but for most of us adults, it goes dormant. Well, so I started teaching that, and then you know, my sister's guide Thoth was like, well, you can really do this a lot easier with a single breath by going into the heart space. And so in 2015, we actually created what we call the Crystal Merkaba. And it is, again, once you activate that, and gosh, I've taught thousands of people, and we have even a website called crystalmerkaba.com, where when you activate your Merkaba field with this simple 3-breath technique, it is, again, an electromagnetic field that you can put intentions into, and it will amplify and hold your intentions. And so the people too that we run into with severe electromagnetic sensitivities, if we just have them activate their Merkaba field, it will harmonize those electromagnetics as they come into your field. And so again, we make the tools, as we call them, as training wheels and as ways for people to harmonize their own fields, to stay connected and grounded within their own light. But back to my sister, when, gosh, and again, I was very science-minded until she did a distance healing with me, and that totally blew that side of my mind to where I started to really waking up to my remembrances of creating these higher dimensional tools for lifetimes. So my sister Brenda, basically, we've seen people with fist-sized tumors in their lung. One telephone call with her, 2 weeks later, it's gone. People with pancreatic cancer sent home to die. 2 months later, they're fine. How this happens is that she helps them bring in their light. And, you know, we see healing as simply release and rebalancing. And so when we do this deep release work, that is really where we see the miracles taking place. And so that's what we basically put into all of our tools, is that they're a giant toolbox for your higher self, your consciousness, your soul, however you see that, to come in and access these fields that come through the rings. So with Brenda, she brought through what we call the Trinity breath, which is simply a 3-breath technique to move the consciousness from the head back into the heart. And you know, all this energy work that we've done, you know, we see that there was a new paradigm really in 2020 that really began, because prior to that, me and a lot of my circle, we cleared so many artificial grid systems on the planet, such as the church grids, the Masonic grids, all of the state capital grids. Basically, these grid systems were utilized dragons because as a dowser, well, as a lot of dowsers and back into Chinese medicine, there was the dragon lines and the tiger lines. And these dragon lines were simply geomagnetic lines. So we see these mythical beings as actual beings that we have an abnormal number of them on our planet of Earth because they were all brought here to create these grid systems. So whenever we were clearing these grids, we would always find the dragons within that basically they're the ones who create these grids. And so through all the clearing work through these years, we've cleared everything except for the Vatican. And of course, the guide said, well, it still needs to be there to help people wake up. So Vatican, Washington, D.C. itself, were a lot of the grids that were not cleared at that time, which have since left. So I have a lot of stories on our website, a lot of videos of workshops that I've taught of the clearing work that we used to teach people. And we used to teach people how to access columns of light. And I still teach columns of light, but not for the old paradigm of doing the clearing work, the clearing of old energy systems. Because again, we've seen that we've stepped into a whole new world since 2020. It used to be that I would clear entity attachments that people would have. I mean, I'd walk down the street and somebody would say something funny and I would look and it was actually an entity, a non-beneficial being attached to that person who was actually there getting my attention. And basically that's what we made these tools for about 8 years, was to do that old work of clearing entities, portal vortexes, non-beneficial implants, all the dark stuff that a lot of people, that are just now kind of awakening, that they're realizing that there's been all of that influence on humanity. And again, we have not, we see that it has gone by the wayside, that there is not that influence that there used to be prior to 2020. But again, back to my sister, and let's jump into that heart space, because a lot of these concepts can really get us into the head and bring us out of the heart. So we see this Trinity breath as simply connecting heart to heart with the earth, and then creation, however you see and say that, and bringing them both together so that you are this conduit of light, that you are a light column that is grounded and connected. And what we see that doing is simply moving your consciousness, which we see as a little ball of light about the size of a marble that sits right behind the brain. It looks out our physical eyes. It sees the world separate. It is influenced by the emotional field. It is influenced by thoughts, programs, beliefs. And when we move that back into the heart space, so the reason I kind of went off on the tangent before was just to talk about where we see the seat of the soul, where we see a person's light, or any being that we've ever worked with out in the multiverse. We always see that there is a soul spark, even in these darkest, most malicious beings out there, that we see a spark of divinity within the heart. And so when we used to do all this clearing work, that is what we did, was we would help move their consciousness back into the heart space to where they would connect with soul. They would drop their agendas and go. And again, that's what I did for about 10 years, was just that deep clearing work. And to do that again, it's just reconnecting those beings to their divinity. And so when we move into the sacred space, the heart, again, when you drop into the heart space, you're not influenced by all of the emotional field. Everything just becomes calmer and more at peace. So would love to share this 3-breath technique with you. And just closing your eyes if you wish, and imagining within your heart is your light, and imagining connecting heart to heart with the earth, with that heart of Gaia, the heart of Mother Earth, and breathing in that supporting energy up through the feet and into the heart. And then connecting heart to heart with you as creator God, source, soul, however you see that. Breathing in that light into the heart. In this third breath is breathing in both from earth and sky, breathing in from heaven and earth. And you simply become that conduit, that connection between earth and creation. And when you do, that's when you move into that heart space. And so open your eyes if you wish, and if you can. And this is truly what it is like to see the world from the heart and not from the chatter and the other perspectives. This gives you a new, different perspective on everything. And it's an exercise. It's something that you can do this Trinity breath before you go to bed at night. It helps stop all the mental chatter. You do it before you make a decision, because we're so influenced by programs, beliefs, and emotions when we're in the head thinking about things and logically. But when we are in the heart space, that is really where you get your really good guidance. And that's why, I've taught at the American Society of Dowsers several times, is because I try to teach people how to go into the heart space before they do their dowsing work, because we're so influenced by the mind. I mean, the human is such a hardwired thing that we see things and base it on emotions, and we create things and believe them to be true. And when you're in your heart space, it also, that's where you're stepping out of a lot of those old belief structures, is when you go into the heart space. So anyway, the sacred space of the heart is something that we do before we do like the Merkaba activations. We have tons of free videos on YouTube, and we do everything from the sacred heart activation, which is what you always see, that trifold gold flame heart with Jesus and Mary, and it's beyond religion. It's about the human and about activating that facet of our soul's light. And even with that sacred heart activation, which is free on YouTube as well, that is one that we see people having miraculous results by simply going into the heart space and bringing in that light and wrapping up an ache or a pain or something in the physical. And again, that is one of the things that my sister did with our friend that had the fist-sized tumor in their lung, in one telephone call, and it was gone, was by simply bringing in that light. So it's truly amazing what we can do from the heart space using visualization, imagination, and intention, because there's power behind that. It is our light, which, truly we see the answer to everything is consciousness. So like with the AI debates, I see that AI and technology can really benefit humanity in such a huge, huge way. But yet there is the danger in it. But AI can never have consciousness, that spark of soul, that spark of divinity. And so really it's, to us, it's about shining our light into that whole system. Because again, we really feel that consciousness is the answer to everything. I mean, you look at Dr. Emoto's work and what it does with water. And, all of you who are familiar with Dr. Emoto's work, where they flash freeze the crystals after you put an emotion into a jar, your emotion of love, your emotion of hate, and then they flash freeze those crystals. Or else you do the rice experiment, as many, grade schoolers actually do, where they take 2 jars of rice, write hate on one and love on the other, and kids feed that their emotions. And like the frozen water crystal is just discombobulated and ugly, and the frozen crystal for love is just those beautiful snowflakes. And that's the same with rice. Rice molds, and that has the hate on it, and the love, it stays clear. Now, that is with emotions, and emotions are kind of a lower vibrational, if you will, versus consciousness. And so the water rings that we actually create for dancing with water, these water rings we see are, again, bringing in the consciousness of water. And again, we teach people, we have a video out there. It's an old video that Slim Spurling, pushed me to create, as well as giving out those sacred measurements to create tensor rings on your own. And anybody can create a tensor ring, but again, it's a harmonizing field. But when we bring in those etheric templates, the higher dimensional aspect, where we're bringing in the consciousness of water, we're seeing the difference in the restructuring of water going from about 8 hours for a standard tensor ring down to 4 to 6 hours. And now then, with this trio of rings that Dancing with Water also sells, we're getting that down to 2 to 4 hours that it physically restructures the water. And we're seeing that again because it is bringing the consciousness of water in more. And when we're also working with the water, water is an amazing, amazing healing potential right there. We can actually ask the water, when they're within these fields, to bring through the frequencies and properties and consciousness of any of the plants or crystals on the planet. So like if you know that you need bergamot for your water, you just simply speak into your water, bergamot, with the tensor ring around there, leave it set for 2 to 4 hours. And it is then kind of like the Bach flower remedies, in that it is carrying that consciousness, frequencies, properties of that particular plant. So it's pretty amazing, the tensor technology and what we see occurring with those daily. Again, with like the 5G millimeter wave, when they first introduced that in the football stadium 2018 in Chicago, right after that, there was a lot of people that were having severe sensitivities to electromagnetics. We have a lot of naturopath doctors out in that region who they had an influx of patients right after they introduced that 5G millimeter wave. And again, it's that golden fire energetic of that sacred heart that we put into these golden fire tools that we're seeing is remediating, even the 5G millimeter waves. I went downtown in Chicago when they started putting those millimeter wave boxes up, and we just did, muscle testing experiments there. No scientific, just, basically, how do you feel, and how do you feel once you have that golden fire ring with you, and do muscle testing with people, kinesiology, which, in some countries, kinesiology is a scientific approach to working with the person. So I'd love to open this up to questions, because I could certainly go down a lot of different rabbit holes and tangents with all this technology. But again, the consciousness work is really what we're really passionate about. And, and I say open up to questions, I'm sitting here still chatting. I wanted to see if I can show you our studio here. And this is the top of this pyramid, is what a lot of people put on Dr. Sanders' work, are these Ascension pyramids, as we call them. And in the background, we have some other larger pyramid, or some other larger structures. Our first chamber that we created in 2015 was one that I had tor rotator cuffs. When I stood in this first chamber, it creates about a 300-mile wide toroidal field. My rotator cuffs were on fire for like 10 minutes. And after that, I have not had to have the surgery. My rotator cuffs are great. And we have people that fly and drive from all over the world to come stand in these various chambers that we create. A lot of people claim it clears cancer, addictions, all kinds of just beautiful testimonials that we receive with these tensor fields. And so we're actually creating these lay down beds back here as well. We create large rings for a gentleman from Egypt who is creating these beds that use our tensor technology in them as well. We use them for plant growth. There's just so much you can do with the tensor technology. But and do we have any questions, Crystal? Or anybody that's here?
Wow, this is amazing. I mean, we have Dr. Michael here as well in the audience. Possibly she would like to say something about having your tensor technology by her work as well. Would you like to?
Yeah, and
say something about
I don't know if Dr.
Dr. Michael?
Sandra's ever experienced our technology firsthand.
Oh, you forgot to unmute yourself, Dr. Michael. We couldn't hear you.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, remember I came and visited you with Mark Peebler and Stephanie.
In
You remember?
Vegas, yes.
No, not well, Vegas, but no, in South Dakota.
Oh
Remember
goodness.
for
Oh
Stephanie's
goodness, Dr.
birthday
Sandra.
and duh.
Yes.
But these were the kind of things I built as a kid, and yeah, I mean, I was doing all of these, so I love this. I actually have one of your big copper pyramids in my bedroom with my kids grew up under pyramids.
Beautiful.
Before I developed this technology, and my initial technology was all done broadcasting it and amplifying with the pyramids too. So yeah, so it fits hand in hand, the torsion fields, and the transmutation of energy. And I loved how normally I talk about the standing column or wave through our spine, that pillar of light that we're meant to be standing in our power, our light, and our love, being those pillars in the temple of God. And so I'm really happy that you talked about that too. And the breathing, that breath is from the heart. And that's what changes everything, because it's the only thing that really matters is the love that we share. So thank you.
So this is what it's all about.
Thank
This
you.
platform brings together all these technologies that could enhance and complement each other. Isn't that wonderful? With Tensor Technology based on Slim Spurling's devices, working together with the scalar technology. And I suppose if you would get together with Renee Swain as well, one of our speakers who just spoke about his mid-bed that he built himself by his own hands. I think it's going to bring loads and loads of benefits for humanity once you work together like that with all these technologies. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, my apologies, Dr. Sandra. Over the past 2 years, I have released almost all memories as I've been releasing my old identity as the light worker in duality. So thank you.
Right. James, would you like to co-chair in this session? Press?
I'm not. Yeah, I can. Do I got a Tensor Ring. I could show it if you want to see it.
Oh, awesome.
Okay, hold on a second.
Well, and so yeah, I would love to talk more deeply into the consciousness work that we've been doing since 2020, in that we put into the Tensor Rings, because again, the Tensor Rings, they're science-based, but really where we see those miracles and magic taking place is when we're inviting in our light more and doing that release work. So what we discovered in 2019 was actually the chalice energetics. And this chalice energetics, if you see in duality, you have like the yin yang, the black and the white. And that has always been the driving force of creation, to create that balance between dark and light. And we see that our soul comes in, that we see, creation, source, and then we see source wanting to have experience, so it creates soul, and soul has all these incarnations. And the way we understand it, especially in the past couple of years as energy healers and workers, we see so many clients that their physical, mental, and emotional and life situation issues that they come are about old unfinished business, old past life traumas, old, just old structures of belief and such. And so this chalice energy is something that, instead of that black and that white, this chalice comes in as this crystal clear, pure consciousness light. And it simply just is. It doesn't fight the dark. It doesn't take sides with the light. And then the light and the dark simply let go. It is changing duality as we see it, because truly we see that we came into this world and we veiled ourselves as these human incarnations to keep ourselves separate from ourselves, so that we could come here, have all these experiences. We have soul families, which, you know, are no longer, we see all these soul families that have always come in to share these experiences, to create experience, to bring it in as wisdom. And over the past couple of years is that's what we are doing as energy workers, healers, is we're helping the person find where the root cause of whatever their issue is that comes in, and we go to that point and we bring the soul in, because the soul is what truly does the work, and it brings those experiences, those traumas, everything else. The soul distills the light and information from that lifetime or that experience or that trauma, brings it in as wisdom, and then that no longer exists the way that it did. And so, interesting thing, when I first created this Divine I Am activator pendant and I put it on, well, actually, the first time I stood in this pyramid chamber here that I created about 3 years ago, I saw myself as this lotus, and these lotus petals were falling away, and they were simply lifetimes. And in the core of that lotus was my soul, my light, and it was distilling the light and information from those lifetimes as they fell away. And that was the first time that we really saw this concept. And it has just gone deeper and deeper over these past 3 or 4 years that, you know, again, we had that chalice energy that helped to wake us up to the whole concept of duality and releasing that whole duality. And so throughout this whole process, we've come to what we call the wisdom rings. And these wisdom rings are also what we put in these pyramid chambers, is that it is holding a space for your soul to come in and distill that light and information out of all these lifetimes of experience. And it brings it in as wisdom, light, and consciousness. And so we see that the deeper and darker dive that you take in any lifetime or any experience, the more light and wisdom your soul elicits from that experience. And that is what comes in as consciousness. And this is where we see the level of consciousness raising on the planet so greatly, is because of this work is just taking place. And again, the tools that we create aren't anything that's something that's not being done, but they are holding a space for a lot more quickness, grace, and ease for what is truly happening on the planet. And that is, people, all this stuff comes up for people to see, to recognize, to release. And it's just gotten so much quicker and easier as the entire consciousness of the planet has just risen so much, especially over this past couple of years. We're going on such a steep incline in consciousness. And so, you know, all the clearing work that I personally have done over the past 2 years, I mean, I spent last September horizontal. I mean, my sister or her partners could not even see me to even help me, but they saw all the death doors open. But I was taking deep dives, and because I go through things kind of the tough way. For like 2 years, I would always call my sister and be like, help, you know, something's not right. This sucks. I'm going through all this stuff. I'm having all these emotional reactions, and everything's terrible. And she's like, well, you have to let go. And I'm like, what am I holding on to? And that's it, is that we hold on to so many things that we don't even know that we hold on to, such as our old patterns, our old beliefs, old traumas, and everything, and even from other lifetimes. And so, you know, to give an example, every time I would jump on my bike, my motorcycle, to go drive around last summer, I would always see a vision of myself tumbling across the highway and my 12-year-old daughter mourning my death. And I was like, you know, and it came from me. It didn't come from any outside. And so finally I was like, okay, ego, what is going on here? You know, I thought I've done all this wonderful work with healing and stepping the ego into a new higher octave. And so I called my sister. I was like, Brenda, what is this? She's like, oh, well, that is another aspect, another lifetime, if you will, a soul aspect that was coming in and bringing its projections and its fears onto me. And so when I saw myself dying and my daughter mourning my death, it was that aspect of me. And so that's really what we've been doing for this past year or so, is working with soul aspects, those lifetimes, those experiences, and those traumas, and basically using your soul light and bringing them in to wisdom. So it's bringing all of their junk and all of their experiences and the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, not just the bad stuff, but it brings it all in as consciousness and wisdom. And again, it's happening with people all over. As I was saying, prior to 2020, all I did was entity clearing. Since 2020, everything got really quiet for a minute. Then we started seeing people once in a while coming up with these big dark things in their field. We were seeing that they were simply aspects of the soul, other lifetimes of experience, because again, the deeper and darker dive we take as a soul incarnation, the more light and wisdom and consciousness we elicit from that lifetime or experience. And so when people see or feel something dark coming into their field, they're like, no, and that's the way with me. I used to have Archangel Michael that rode on my shoulder, and people be like, Michael, why are you so dark? And he'd be like, I'm helping Brian integrate the dark and the light. I was like, oh, no, I'm a light worker, damn it. I don't, no dark. I fight the dark. And, and I was a master angelic warrior for eons. And I remember this and got really good at it, especially in this lifetime. And so that's where I had to set down everything and just, and step into harmonizing all that. So again, the wisdom tools, that's why we call them the wisdom, is because that's what they're doing, is that they're bringing those experiences in as wisdom.
Thank you, Brian. But James, do you have any question or something? Because you are a super duper super soldier who has got this innate curiosity in trying out everything, James. You've gone to Dr. Michael's house to try out her scalar technology EE system, and then you also got your tensor rings, and you've gone to Renee's to sleep on his medbed as well. James, wonderful. Right, do you have any last thing to say before we move this session to the last speaker, Alfred? Because he's been waiting a long time to speak.
And thank you, Alfred, by the way, very much.
No, let's go ahead and let's go ahead and bring Alfred in. And thank you so much. Great presentation.
Thank you. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be here. And thank you for having me on here. I know I was going to be here with Randy Hatton, who is a phenomenal water specialist, and would love to have played with him. I see he's down in Costa Rica setting up a Gaia fountain at the moment. So thank you for having me on today.
Crystal, real quick. I've got 2 points to bring up with our guest today. First one was on your tensor rings for the back of the cell phones. With the work that we've done with the FESIG group, we are finding that when we get cell phones in around toroidal fields, they heat up really bad. I mean, you can't get within feet of them, and even when everything's turned off, the cell phones heat up. And I was wondering if you had any reaction with your tensor rings or any insight with what you're doing compared to what we've run into in the research.
No, our original Ascension chambers that created that 300-mile wide torus, it would eat up phones. It would eat up electronics. But since then, I guess that's kind of what we put into that higher dimensional aspect. Our higher intentions is to harmonize with these. And that's kind of what, I'm wondering too, is if in your working with those toroidal fields that you simply ask that to harmonize with this technology, and then that's kind of a thought that I kind of feel too, because again,
The cell phones don't like it's part of the charging mechanism is what we can see from it, where it sends out a pulse because of the rangefinder in the cell phone for focusing. It's a sonar that the toroidal fields will then echo it back and charge the battery while it's discharging, and the batteries just heat up, and it's every time. You have to really watch the cell phones around these devices. The second one, real quick, which goes back to your toroidal rings and the yin and yang, and I just grabbed the first thing I find that was round, which was a coaster. But if we take a look at the yin and yang symbol, we have 2 points in the middle, one on each side. So we get the duality, even though we're looking at the yin and yang with this light above, dark below, this fight, this dichotomy. What I'm seeing is we're starting to see that field turned onto its side or rotated up, and this light field going through the dots. So the duality is starting to be diminished with this change in direction of 90 degrees. And so I find it interesting that that image is coming through along with what you're doing with your tensor rings. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you and to Crystal. I'm out of here. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Fraz. Appreciate that. You know, and that's interesting with the yin yang. Simply a different perspective, and everything changes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fraz. I was mentioning James trying out all these things, right? Because whatever speakers we bring in with their technologies, their inventions, I'm using him as an example for all of you out there, viewers, to try it out, because you don't know what's going to work well for you. We have miracles here, as Dr. Michael had presented. And then we have the tensor rings as well of Brian's, and James had tried most of it out. It's so amazing, James. So there you go. I think there being no other business now, this session, second session, is adjourned to the third session, where Alfred Weberry-Lembry-Moon will be speaking about the AI invasion. So don't go, folks, stay on. This is so interesting. It's so important. Knowledge is power, right? So we have to get to the bottom of the AI invasion. Thank you so much, Brian, for speaking.
Thank you, Brian.
It's inspiring. Thank you, Dr. Michael, for staying on. So you stop the recording now, Pontus?
Yeah.
Thank you.